All right, good day. Thanks for coming by. Sorry it's a little warm in here. I'd obviously like to start and acknowledge all the people entering the Hall of Fame, in particular Zdeno Chara, obviously well earned. Congratulations to Big Z and his family, and former teammate of mine as well with Jumbo Joe going in. It's nice to see a couple of Bruins players that are being acknowledged at the highest level of accomplishment as a hockey player. Questions?
Did you always want to see the uniform you wore playing for the Bruins back in the team?
Yeah, I'm fortunate enough. Adam pulled the new logo out for me to my modeling debut. Not very good at it, but I've always had an affinity for it. There's just something classic about it that it's always caught my eye. And as we've gone back, and obviously Cam's a big part of the decision-making process. And organizationally, we've just always sort of held it in high regard, and an opportunity to bring it back is pretty special.
Harry Sinden was the one who wanted one unified logo like Montreal and Chicago have on both sweaters. This is a departure from that. Was he to consult? How is it right away?
Probably apologizing after the fact rather than consulting before. Harry's doing okay. Obviously, you get to talk hockey with him. He still watches all the games and can recount things to you that you want to double think, rethink. He's been such a great mentor for me and our organization overall. Health is obviously the biggest question mark in terms of where he is at this stage in his life, but we think about him all the time, and I think he's okay with when things evolve. I think he's always been part of that and a steward of the game. Whenever I go back to general managers meetings, they talk ad nauseum, and the players, the people that protected the game, and Harry was always a steward there. I think he's fine. He's a traditionalist at heart, clearly, and respected the history of the Boston Bruins, but he also understands what forward-thinking mentality has to be and embraces it.
Don, this last month, what's it been like since we last caught up with you? The process of evaluating players and who may be there and receptive to your team?
Yeah, this time of the year we run sort of dual rooms with toggling back and forth with the guys that have been working an awful lot here to fill in any final gaps with the draft scenario. They feel really comfortable where they are in picking the top 7. We've had a lot of discussions over the last month and a half of potential options with that pick. Are still exploring them as of today, probably just as of tomorrow as well. So we feel very comfortable with making a selection, but we're going to continue to see what might present between now and then.
Are you expecting league-wide there'd be a lot of movement?
You just never know in terms of the draft. I think there will be movement. Just based on even a couple of the moves that happened today, I think there's some jockeying going on. Teams that are trying to move up, teams that are willing to slide back, teams with multiple picks that have volume of picks that they can shuttle around. I think there'll be some movement.
How valuable do you think those 2 first-rounders you have next year are in the trade market for this year?
It's funny. I mean, obviously you get probably short-term sighted in terms of the players that you have a chance to draft this year. Yet people have asked about moving, volume of picks wise and maybe getting out into next year's and kicking it down the road so they spread things out. So I would say it's probably as the year goes along, or from a player acquisition standpoint, a little more valuable than the draft collateral side of things with swapping. But somebody might just not like where their list is trending and may look to pivot in the middle of the draft and or certainly from the second round on.
Don, there's not a whole lot of consensus in public rankings outside of the top 2 or maybe just the top 1. In your mind, do you feel like there's a randomness to this, or do you feel like you might have a better grasp of how a board might break?
I mean, outside of your own list, I don't think you have any. I mean, people ask the questions, but sometimes people are misleading. Sometimes people are truthful. At the end of the day, you only control your own draft board. So you have to react in terms of what other teams are likely to take. You can look at other teams' depth charts and somewhat figure out what they might target, but everybody's looking for the best player. You know, you're picking at the top part of the draft, you need what you think who is the best player to impact your own club.
So even though there's a half a dozen centers, the consensus makes it likely that one of those players is gonna fall to the number 7. You guys are committed to the best player available regardless of position, if there's a consensus in management as to who that best player is.
Yeah, we're taking the best player. Ultimately, you know, players played on the wing. You know, one of the young men in the top part of the draft played pretty primarily on the wing in a pro league this year. So is he a center down the road? Yes. But you also have players that are currently in the National Hockey League that were earmarked as centers that are really effective wingers as well and creating from the wing. I don't think it's just a married position to the player. They might start out one way and move into the middle of the ice. That a lot of players do. It's hard to just be a winger and then decide you're going to be a center later on. Ultimately, I think the centers carry a lot of weight in that regard, and some players are adamant. No, I am a center. I'm just a center. But you know, there are players that really don't care. They consider themselves top 6 players or top line players, and that's where they want to play and play with the best players they possibly can.
Given where the team and the roster is now, is there a bigger pull organizationally over the next couple of years to keep all those picks and select just a wave of young players, or use some of those picks to bring in proven NHL talent to augment the NHL roster?
Yeah, we would absolutely augment our roster if there's an eye towards now and the future. I don't think it's a short-term, acquisition that we'd be inclined to make at this point in time. When we have runway, you know, I think that's what we would look to do. Otherwise, we are going to focus on some of the draft capital that we have and use it as effectively as we possibly can. So I don't say that when something presents and a player that has some term and or runway that we wouldn't jump at that, because we would.
Not exactly at the draft, but a two-part question on Brad. Have you spoken with him since he won the Cup in Florida? And any thoughts, early thoughts, considerations on if he could ever come back here and play?
So my only comment that I'll make is I've exchanged texts to congratulate Brad. Beyond that, he's a player on another team, so I have zero comment on that regard. You know, he deserves congratulations along with the Florida Panthers. I don't have social media, so I haven't been following some of his other.
Is that a comment?
That I know about Brad.
With picks in play around the league heading into the weekend and roster players too, based on where you see conversations having taken place, where you see the market trending, do you think you would be in a position to trade a player off your current roster heading into the weekend if you see something that you'd like to acquire?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we're going to use all the opportunities that present to explore what will improve us now and moving forward. As I said, I think we have to have an eye towards what we're capable of doing this year and you know, in the upcoming years in conjunction with the draft and building around that. That was our philosophy at the deadline, and realizing we had to take a step back, and we're going to get back into a competitive mindset with an eye towards growing to the future. And that's what we just had to do. As I said before, I don't think you can be stuck in neutral.
Has there been any progress made towards an extension with Morgan Geekie?
I mean, there's been constant communication. You know, are we on the doorstep? I don't think so, but that can change within one phone call. You know, again, you get in around this time frame, and sometimes you're tracking on a deal and you get it done right away, and other times it gets sort of pushed to the back burner as to what everybody else is maybe focused on. Doesn't mean that my attention isn't on Morgan and being able to close out a deal. We have time in that regard, so I'm not concerned about it.
Would you file for arbitration if you don't have a deal by that date?
I mean, arbitration is possible for both sides. Like, at the end of the day, we're going to find a deal, as I said before, whether it's one or much, much longer. You know, we have zero issues in the fact that we're going to find a deal at some point in time.
Have you made any decisions on any of your UFAs or qualifying offers for RFAs?
We've been in touch with everybody in that regard. Currently trying to get through a couple of them right now. We've indicated to a couple of the other guys that what direction we may head. So I think they're all privy to what they may have available for them next week. Yeah.
Can you tell me
who's staying and who's not.
That was a vague way to respond that I wasn't going to give you any names at this point in time, but I hopefully can politely say that all the players themselves know.
You got Lowry taken care of already. Was there anything about his negotiations that allowed it to come together before the draft? Was he wanting to get it done before the draft? Just how did that all come together?
I mean, ultimately, you'd rather have everybody done before the draft standpoint. You know kind of where your roster sits. Sometimes deals have their own timeline. In Mason's case, we had open dialogue, and Evan did a lion's share of the work with the Bartlett family on that one, and they found sort of the common ground. It was a little bit of a complicated situation, the fact that he put up good numbers and, was exposed a little bit defensively, work to be done. I think both sides are happy in terms of finding the middle ground.
You confident that when he's playing behind Hampus and Nikita Zadorov, that he'll be in a situation that'll be support him better to continue growing his defensive game like he was not this past season, but the season before?
Well, if you look at the body of work and realizing that he played in an elevated role in the playoffs, 2 years ago, and handled that situation pretty well. It was not a liability in any way. The way that as you referenced, the exposure side of it without having other players around it, like that can take its toll. Players that are playing against top matchups and every given night, and playing uphill in a lot of cases that we were in the second part of the season, that takes its toll on all players, and particularly younger players, and probably in the back end. So he knows there's work to be done. Like, at the end of the day, he's not a finished product by any means, and we just have to go to work on some of the areas that fell short. The offensive part of the game. I think there's still tremendous upside with Mace. So we're just going to go to work with it.
As you head into this part of the calendar, especially compared to other years where you haven't had the first round pick, you've been tight in terms of available cap space. What do you consider your biggest assets, strengths, things that are in your favor as you head into draft weekend?
Well, again, we have, as you referenced, we have draft capital that we haven't had in past that, we're perfectly happy making selections, but we're going to continue to see what the marketplace might bear, and whether that's players or move back, move up scenarios. So I think we're well positioned to be able to explore those. As years past, we haven't been. I think we've got a core group of guys that when healthy, are going to put us right back in a competitive mindset. And now we have to do a good job to surround that or grow it. There's going to be opportunity for players to take that next step. Marco's done a good job connecting with every player and getting them to understand that they need to come in ready. There'll be an opportunity, whether the youngest player that tries to crack our roster, but you're not going to be handed anything. So that's the messaging. But we feel really good about the sort of the group of players that we have, and now we have to do a good job, surrounding them.
Don, does your approach to the draft change year to year? Is it different this year than maybe last year or years past with the draft?
Well, I mean, we're picking at a much more elevated position, so we're acutely aware of those players that are there versus moving back, moving up, what the acquisition costs versus the move back, and who those players might be if you do that, the player you might be passing up on. So it's just different. We haven't done it for a number of years. Envious of teams that have had the opportunity, and now we're in a good situation to try and do that. So I think you have to treat it a little differently.
Given what you have in cap space and roster spots to fill, do you see yourself as pursuing a big ticket item, so to speak, or is that not based on the way the likelihood of spreading that?
I think we're going to try to be in on everything that makes sense for the roster and what we're capable of doing. Those might be two completely different things depending on what the player themselves at the right time decide where they want to play and who they want to play with. I think we are an attractive team to be considering, given the opportunities that I think we'll present in our top 9 in particular. So hopefully at the right time, teams will have, players themselves will have a lot of interest, and we can complement our roster. But it's my job to know who those types of players are and what our scouts would like to, who they've identified can help us.
Let me ask it a different way. Whether it's through free agency or for trade, do you think you take the step that you want to take? You feel like you need to add a top six or?
Yeah, I mean, I can answer it the same way and say that we'd like the best player we can the same way in the draft. Ultimately, we would clearly like to add the best player that may or may not be available between now and July 1st. So on July 1st, you're doing all this legwork, and then you have to figure out whether or not it lines up with the other player. That's just what we have to do. So hopefully we're in a position to add a player as you described. We do need depth on our roster, so we have to be careful in terms of how we're going to address that. Again, some of that might be internal growth and allowing players that played some games last year to take the next step if they're capable of doing that. But I don't want to just hand that over to them. I want them to know they have to come in and earn that and take somebody's job rather than just sort of be given one. I just don't think that exists in the National Hockey League.
Is there much of a challenge or a unique challenge when it's a player or prospect like Roger McQueen, who, in that general area of where you're going to be picking and missed most of the year with injury? Just, that specific, but just generally speaking, if there's a prospect that had injury in his draft year and missed most of the time, does that make it difficult at all to sort of forecast what he's going to do?
Yeah, well, it makes it a little more challenging in the volume of games and the situational things that you weren't able to see a player play in. I know it's never just a 1-year exercise for our scouts. Sometimes it's 2 to 3 years of watching games and watching the progression of the player. I think in some of those unique cases, you have to do your due diligence. Now, the combine and the medicals and some of the things that the players, the agents, and the league are able to provide to our own guys to be able to dive in and figure out what the medical history of the player and what it looks like moving forward have become a much more key component to making those decisions and evaluating those players. And that's where it gets a little trickier to make sure you've got everybody. Unfortunately, we had medical guys that traveled to the combine. We have medical people here review. So we should be in a better situation to make a informed decision about that and how that's going to affect a young man, his growth and development. It definitely presents challenges, but ultimately all 32 teams have the same challenge.
John, when you meet with your scouts and you talk about this draft and the next couple for that matter, is there anything that you look at and tell them in your organization, we need more of this or we need more of that? Is there any one maybe skill set or spot that you guys have pinpointed and say we need to bring more of that here?
Well, I think I'm going back to saying that we're looking for the most impactful players. Now, impact can come in the competitiveness, it can come in hockey sense, it can come in skill, it can come in scoring. When you can combine them all, obviously you get the perfect storm. It's not a positional decision for us. Do we have areas that we would like to fortify if we have the opportunity, depending on where the draft is deepest? And you can choose from players that might be similarly positioned. But ultimately, we have to find the most, competitive and skilled players that we possibly can. They exist generally in the top part of the draft from the standpoint of the skill standpoint, but the competitive nature and the growth of players that, trickle down later in the draft, they're there. And, hopefully we do a better job or continue to do a good job. In some cases, we have done a really good job. So I want to make sure our guys know we're not trying to be myopic in how we view things, to just say it's center-based or it's, skill-based or just a guy who can shoot a puck. Like, ultimately, we got to put all the decision-making lenses, and make the best decision we can. But, yeah, more skill and scoring and competitiveness are the areas that we need.
Don, you generally worked quickly on July 1st. Is that the preference, or are there situations where you might wait around to see how things develop?
Well, my obvious answer to that is most teams are working pretty quickly within that time frame. If you're asleep at the gun when the gun goes off, chances are you're left behind. There's not a lot of, you get your other contracts done, but you have to have done work ahead of time, in terms of who or may not be available, and then try to go to work. It's not easy preparing for it, but it is what it is. We all face the exact same thing.
Prices are usually inflated a little bit for the high-end guys on July 1. Do you think this year they're even more so with all the money that's coming into the system?
I laugh.
Maybe for-
I laugh because an RFA treats it the same way. Ultimately, the agent's doing his job. They're trying to in an RFA market, they're trying to find the highest comp they possibly can. They're not starting at the left end of the ledger. So it's just it's just where the marketplace drives and what the need you have and what you're willing to do. Ultimately, that's exactly how it comes down to, if it went way back when you're a UFA, I don't think a player treats it any differently back in the day than they do now. Ultimately, they want the best place, they're where they're happiest, their hands are on the steering wheel, they get to make a decision at what works best for them. But the agents are all doing their job. They're all looking that way, not that way. So, again, the overriding thing is, free agency is what it is. It's an opportunity for the player to drive his own market value.
Do you think the climate for offer sheets is any different now than it was, say, 7 years ago?
I just think it takes a unique situation, other than it just throwing a dart somewhere. It generally takes a team that has a situation where they're a little bit exposed for somebody to take advantage of it. You can do it and throw caution, but the space is, most cases teams have spaces to match, and then they figure out what they do from there. Whether they're unhappy about it and down the road there's a boomerang, who knows? I think they exist. I think everybody would like to explore it if it would work. But it hasn't worked a lot. But when it does, it's a good move. Last year's a great example of that. But it does take a unique situation for it to generally play out.
I know you don't listen to all the podcasts, but the scuttlebutt is that there's a lot of teams that didn't quite get into the playoffs that think that they're close and that they're more likely to be aggressive, and there's more buyers now and more competition for talent coming July 1st. And that doesn't make you any more concerned about getting Geeky done before that date, for instance, and making sure that you don't have to be put in a position you don't want to be in where concerns going forward with him on your team.
Yeah, I have no concerns in terms of, we treated it the exact same way with Jeremy last year. We value the asset. We know what the market value is. We're just trying to find a deal, but there's no exposure there. I wouldn't put the team in the organization in a situation where we felt there was exposure. So again, it takes a unique situation. I agree with you that everybody does want to improve their hockey club. So, generally that narrows the supply.
You're going to take Letourneau in the first round. How would you assess his first college season?
Significant growing pains, making a very big jump from the level of hockey he was the year before to the demands of college. There's a little uniqueness there with Will Smith leaving early to go to the NHL. We talked a little bit about what would be in the best place in terms of Dean, and in hindsight, I think we all would have agreed that maybe another year of the USHL, a full year of the USHL would have been the best path. Physically, he was able to play at the college level, and again, that opportunity presented in a bit of a unique fashion. I think everybody was sort of with the understanding that, hey, physically he was ready to do it. Now, whether or not you can carry that over in the highest level, because that's what the expectations of BC is, and be successful from a point production standpoint, that's a leap. Deep down, is he better off for it? Well, we'll see this year, because I think that he's been tested mentally and physically, and he's putting in work now that he has an understanding of how much work it requires to play at that level and be successful. That's not necessarily a negative. It's just that when players have had the success and put up the points of their entire careers, and all of a sudden they're like, hold on, this is a lot harder, it's deflating to a degree. But, in talking through with it, he'll be fine. He'll get, earn his opportunity back, work his way up the depth chart and start to produce like he has. So, I don't look at it as a setback. I just look at it like a reality slap in a lot of ways.
When you talk about internal potential guys who could make the jump for next year, is there anyone you're especially looking at in terms of being able to make that step?
Well, I mean, we've got a collection of guys that got an opportunity last year to come up and play. They should be pinning their ears back. I can go through a list of guys, but they honestly know who they are. From the standpoint of they were competing and they got an opportunity to play last year, they should be excited about coming in and realizing that if they're the better player from camp, they're gonna be on our team. Cole Kopke made our team last year as a perfect example of that. If the next player up can come in and take that job, they're gonna have it. They're gonna earn it. And Marco's communicated that with each and every one of them. So if they put the work in this summer and make the steps and can come and produce and be as competitive as possible and make our team better, then they're going to get an opportunity to play.
Time for two more.
Given Dalton Bancroft's age, be 25 next winter, having him in development camp, what went into that decision?
Just continued familiarity with our organization. Obviously, you got a jump start last year to come down and play in Prov. It's also an opportunity to check in midstream of the summer months, spend a little bit of time with our strength guys, mirror it up with how he's done, how he's doing with his current plan. I just think it's a continued opportunity to be familiar and be more comfortable in our surroundings.
Don, when you look at the defense that you currently have at the NHL level, do you see a need there as well, perhaps on the right side? Or is that one of those things where, you kind of want to see how it plays out in camp?
No, I mean, I'm currently in discussions with Henry, seeing if we can bring him back. We have a need on the right side. There's no question about that.
Thanks.
All right, thanks, everybody.
See you guys Friday.